Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's tree number 7, is using textured flat clear glass. So you can see there in the picture the different pieces of glass. So first of all, I made some shapes to put my glass around and soldered them together. I made these shapes out of thick, a good gauge copper wire, so it has to be bare copper wire. And it was like 16 gauge or 14 gauge or maybe 12 gauge, something, whatever you have that's really robust, that really holds together, is nice. Now I have these triangles that I cut out of different textured glass, clear glass, and I of course foiled them with 7/32 inch foil. And I put this wire around one of my piping tree forms that I had a video on. So it was a piping bag that I put over a tree form to hold the shape of the tree and make it somewhat fire resistant. Now it said that these piping bags were silicone. I don't know if they were as 100% silicone as I wanted them to be, because they did melt. So as you see, that's another wire shape that I used to keep the form of my little triangles all together. So I use wire and made these hexagon, octagon, whatever shape you want to use, and then I would solder the triangles to the points or the flats of, whatever you want for a design, and that would hold the triangles and pieces of glass where you want them. So that's why the main reason I have the wire shape there is just to hold the glass where I want it to be, and to add support, because glass is pretty heavy. You do want to have a good way to hold it together, whether it was a pre-existing wire frame or make your own wire frame type of thing. A lot of people do stained glass that's flat, and then you don't have to worry about the strength quite the same way as when you make a three-dimensional creation. So I'm tacking it together, and again, I'm using either brand new pieces of solder. You can see that long piece of solder there, or just little globs that have fallen onto my table, my work surface. I'm working on a table with a piece of silicone as on top of the tabletop, so it's easy to clean and it doesn't hurt the table. So I cut all these triangles, and now I just need to piece them all together. And yeah, they're not absolutely perfect, because life's not perfect. So sometimes you have to figure out which one fits best where, and that's why I'm putting that one there. And I like to use a lot of different, if I'm doing a project like this, a lot of different textures. So in reality, I'd like to have every single piece of glass a different glass texture, but I do think I had to repeat some of them because I didn't have that many. But I do like to have a nice variety. And yeah, it was a little off right there, but when I'm done, it'll look fine. I have faith. Just needed a little bit of tender loving care to try to get it into shape. And all the seams and everything, I will have to put solder on them to hold them all together, and to make them all the same color, whether I'm going to keep them silver color when I'm done, or whether I'm going to patina them something when I'm finished with the whole project. I also go on the inside and make sure all the joints are soldered nicely to help hold it together. I am tinning all the edges of everything. Tinning meaning adding a layer of solder, not really for strength, but for just the fact of having a layer of solder there for for color, add in a little strength, yeah, but yeah, because a coat of solder on foil is going to be a lot stronger than just the foil. So yeah, it will add some strength to it. I'm also filling in any gaps that happen to exist in my creation. You can see the star up there that I had already attached now to the top of it. I will have part of this video will show how I made that star, but I attached that to the top of it. So this is another way that I made the shape of the octagon. So I had a piece of paper that I had on the computer done different shapes, some hexagons, some octagons, some different shapes. And then when I needed a perfect shape, I could just use that as a template. So now I'm getting ready to put my next piece on. So these are, as you noticed, my shape that I'm attaching to right there at the top had like a little flat area between each angle of the, I think it was an hexagon that I used for this one. I think I had a 5-sided. So I soldered at the top, and then at the bottom I had it all set up to be the right size at the bottom. Now the thing is that I was still kind of concerned about it all staying together, because I mean it's still kind of a big heavy tree. So I will use like little clips right now to help hold the tree, the wire to the piece of glass. So that worked very nicely. So those are just little clips that you can get really easily. They have them all over the place, and they're just very handy when you're trying to clip things here and there. But it was still really hard, as you can see, to hold the darn thing together while I was soldering. So then I was like, okay, well, maybe 2 clips will hold it better, and then I can solder it there. So that's always the tricky thing, is to hold what you're making, especially in these 3-dimensional projects, is to hold it in the right place as you're working on your project. You can see there's some burn marks on the piping cover of this tree. That's because, as I said, this quote silicone piping is not overly great to use as a coating for your tree form. I mean, it did work. You just got to be really careful and not get too much heat on it, because it will melt, and then the bag will actually stick to your solder, which is kind of not wanted. So, you know, there's a little drawbacks with trying different things. So now I'm soldering the larger pieces of glass to both sides, at the bottom ring around it, and the next one up. And I'm trying to stagger the types of glass with what I used on the top one, because as I said, I didn't have enough pieces of glass to make them all different textures. So yeah, I had to figure out, well, let's see which one works best. And you know, it's just a hit and miss, trying to find the one that you want to use. And of course, when you are cutting the glass, you will notice that some types of textures are easier to cut accurately than some others. Well, that's just life. You know, I did cut these with a glass cutter, a handheld glass cutter, because straight lines like this are so much more accurately done by hand with just a hand glass cutter than using a like Taurus ring saw. The ring saw will tend to like wobble and stuff. At least when I do it, it's not as perfect. Yeah, see right there, I am taking off a piece of foil that didn't work very well. So I had to refoil my glass, my flat piece of glass, to make it meet. And then another thing that I did was I decided if I added wire to the circle at the top, I could use that to help attach the flat pieces of glass, and that would add strength. So I did add a lot of wire to this going along the sides of my glass to help keep it all together. And this is something that I do often when I'm making things, is I will make an outline of wire, usually around 20 gauge. So it's not really thick wire, so it's very malleable, but it's not like really thin, like 26 or 28 gauge. So it's kind of a happy medium between the two. So you just use obviously what you have, and also what works for the project on hand. So as you can see at the bottom, that piece of wire was very thick and robust because I wanted that to stay in its shape and not move. Whereas these thin pieces of wire that I use at the top, I want to be able to wrap around and bend wherever I need to. So I want to use a thinner wire there. And with needle nose pliers and a lot of finagling here and there, you can get the wire to go where you want to. Now you can see right to the left of where I'm soldering right now, there's a thicker area of solder there, that thicker line. That's where that triangle didn't fit very well, so I kind of just filled that with wire and solder so that there wasn't a gap there. So I ended up adding a wire to a lot of these sides, I think almost all of them, going from the bottom circle, hexagon shape, to the top. And that really helped hold it together, so I wasn't worried when I picked up my tree later on that the whole darn thing was going to fall apart. That's one thing I did not want, was any worry about my trees falling apart when I picked them up. So just kind of like bent the wire so that it was the shape I wanted. I wanted it pretty close, right along the edge of the glass itself, so that the wire kind of disappeared. So as I was soldering it, I was just kind of like nudging it into the foil. But of course, as with any time you work with foil, especially on an open edge like this, is you got to be careful that you don't heat up the foil too much, because it will fall off the glass. Even though I did use a pretty wide piece of foil, I used the normal 7/32 inch wide foil. I did not cut it so it was narrower pieces like I do for lots of my projects. I kept it the full width so that it would wrap around the piece of glass as much as possible. So I'm using that extra piece that I just bent down at the bottom there, and I'm kind of using that in a way to fill a small gap and to help sturdy the bottom of my tree. So I'm using some solder there to hold it all together. And yeah, as most of my projects, the goal is not to make perfectly smooth seams, because these are three-dimensional and I'm adding lots of different wires and stuff. These will not be like beautiful machine-made looking seams. These are going to be somewhat smooth, but not like beautiful like you would do, like if you're doing like a flat glass mural or something. Then you really want the seams to all be the same width and to be a nice bead, making them all smooth looking. This will not have that look. They will be a little on the clumpier side for this kind of three-dimensional soldering project. So the final look is more the design and the creation of it, but not the beautiful seams that are created. Now, as you can see, I have a wire from the top. I'm going to make that one go down also. And then sometimes I had a wire go the whole way from the top to the bottom, from the top to the bottom. I did that a lot after I was kind of experimenting. So the first few ones I didn't go all the way. And then I was like, I'm going to end up doing one from the top, and then I'm going to end up doing one from the bottom. Why don't I just do one going the whole way? And so that's what I ended up doing on a lot of the pieces. Now you can see that I'm wearing silicone gloves, so I can get silicone gloves from different places. I got these from Temu. I haven't been able to find them exactly this style from Amazon yet, so that's why I don't buy them on Amazon. I like buying most of my stuff on Amazon because I can get it really quick, because I often don't think ahead enough, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to wait 3 weeks to get something. I just want to get it, within the next couple days, because I suddenly need something. But these gloves that I have, as you can see, I've worn them a number of times, and you can just wash them, and you can wear them for a number of projects. So that's pretty cool that, you don't waste them. And wearing silicone gloves helps protect your hands from the temperature. So like you get a little bit of solder, or you're holding something a little bit too close, it doesn't burn immediately. So that's really cool. And it also helps keep the flux and other chemicals off your hands, which is always a plus. It keeps them cleaner, so they don't dry out from the weird chemicals. So I like that. And because another reason I like the silicone gloves as opposed to a lot of the soldering gloves that you can get is that they're really close and cling right to your hands. It's sort of like the nitrile or, other brands that you can get, but the silicone you need. And you can see that my left hand, the back of it already broke. So that one will be thrown away when I'm done with this. So yeah, I mean, they're not the strongest gloves in the world, but, the fingers still work. So I'm not going to change that glove until I'm done with this particular area of soldering today. And then I'll throw that one away and get a new one. Probably doesn't help that I have a ring there, which of course probably helped put a hole in it. So I'm going right now, I'm putting solder along all the seams, all the edges is going to have solder on them, because I want them all to be strong and all to be the same color. And they're all going to have that wire. See, I'm adding another wire right there. See, I'm winding it around the top and then going down the edge. And I did some of this to the top triangles, but it wasn't quite as needed, I don't feel, as the bottom sections, because the bottom is just so much longer, and the heaviness of the glass just needed that extra strength to hold it together properly. So usually I would do like a little wrap at the top and tack it in place, and then I would go along the bottom and go all the way. Now you'll notice when you buy textured glass, or like any glass obviously, but especially this clear textured stuff that I happen to have gotten, is the different thicknesses of the glass. So some of it, as I said before, cuts really smoothly and easy. And some pieces, usually the more textured stuff, is a little bit trickier to have it cut smooth and even. But that's just, something you have to get used to. But also you'll find that the thickness of the glass itself is not necessarily consistent. Now, I got most of my glass here that I'm using for this project at Hobby Lobby, because I can just go right there and pick it up, so I don't have to order it and wait. So that's really cool. And they had like lots of different textures, and whenever I go, I see a new texture. I'm like, yay, I have to get that. I don't know when I'll use it, but I just have to get it. So I do that, and then I have all these pieces of glass that I can choose from. And you can see that I'm doing the inside of everything. Now, I don't really need the inside as much for looks, But it does help make sure that that wire edge that I put along there is completely soldered on, and that it's as strong and put together as possible. So that's why I soldered the inside of this whole project, because this tree is kind of an open tree. It has like lots of big open areas, which a lot of my other trees just have little open areas, but this one has like these pretty big areas here. Um, so I wanted to have everything tinned and coated with solder. I'm going to be adding some more details to the tree itself, and this will make it easier. If you tin stuff ahead of time, um, it is easier to then solder something else to it. So any time when you have something that really you're having a hard time getting the solder to stick to, then take that piece off and tin it. Solder a little bit of put a little bit of solder all the way around everything, and the thing you're trying to solder it to, and then flux it again, and you will find that it's so much easier for the two to go together, because you're not depending on like tinning and soldering at the same time. But yeah, so tinning takes more time to pre-tin everything before you start soldering. So if you can get away without doing it, then you might just do that, not bother the pre-tinning ahead of time. And yeah, I'm using a thin 2 millimeter um, solder for this project. So you can get solder in usually a couple different thicknesses. So the diameter of the solder is usually either 3 millimeter or 2 millimeter, and so this is the 2 millimeter that I'm using right now. Because sometimes when I use the 3 millimeter, it's just like it's too much, and I get a lot more globs on the table of unwanted pieces. And this is more direct. I'm also using a smaller nib than I used to use when I first started. And for these kind of projects, that works great. Now I'm attaching some glass crystals and globs to this. This happens to be a crystal. And so basically I have like tons of crystals that I've already foiled, and I just go, okay, which bunch is going to fit here? And let me see, I need 5. And so I got to make sure that whatever I use, because I want this to be kind of symmetrical, that I have 5 of this particular size. So I found a good one that seems to match nicely. Now, yeah, it's not absolutely perfect when I put these and when I set these in. They're not going to go in, absolutely perfectly, but they did end up fitting pretty nicely. So I kind of filled that space in the bottom with solder, and then the top I just added solder around the top. Now these crystals I had already foiled by taking my foil and cutting it into 3 different thicknesses, or 2 different thicknesses depending on the different crystals, and using that as my foil to go around my crystals. Now I usually use black backed foil. I like black backed foil, because then no matter if I want to keep it silver, or I want to make it into a black patina or copper patina project, I don't end up with that copper sheen on the inside when I don't want to. So because I usually foil up a whole, so I'm using a piece of plastic a plastic container to do my measurement, make sure that crystal's the same height as the one next to it. But because I'm going to make a whole bunch of different things and foil them ahead of time, and have like a whole drawer of all these different foiled pieces for when I need to use them, I just use the black backed for everything, and then I'm all set. I have a consistent look. Now, if I'm doing a project and I know that, oh, for this particular one, that copper foil, on the inside and the outside, that color is fine, and I'm going to make a bunch of that particular just for that project, then I might decide to use a different foil than the black backed. Now, you'll find that different foils are different. You know, some of them are stickier than others, so some will work better than others. Some of them are a little bit thicker than others, so they rip easier, but they do, you know, go around curves better than others. So it's really whatever works for you. I use the Studio Pro brand, and I can put that in my description page so you can see what the foil I generally use is. So you can see that I keep tilting this sideways and then adding foil to the, solder to the foil. Now, this particular crystals I'm putting on right now, these are a little bit flatter crystals, but they're all crystals. So that's what I decided for this project was every glob I put on is going to be a crystal. So, you know, you can make whatever decisions you want to with your projects. I just thought that the crystals would reflect the lights better and make it really fun. So this is a clear tree, so all my added blobs and crystals are going to be clear. So I just had to go in my box of different crystals and go, okay, which one will fit nicely underneath this one that I just put there, and then I just added it underneath, and that worked very nicely. So yeah, if you like to make, you know, these three-dimensional projects like I do, you're going to want to always keep an eye out for glass that you might want to use in the future. And if you see a special on a certain type of crystal, you know, you might want to just get it, because sometimes it's hard to find exactly what you want. Some of these crystals I had to buy ones that were already painted on the back, so they're really for people doing mosaics or something where they want it to be, you know, flat onto something. And then I had to remove the backing from the crystal, which is really kind of a pain. It's usually like some kind of mirrored paint that's put on the back of these things so that they shine really nice when they're attached flat to an object. And I do have a video on how I went about using different chemicals to remove the backing, but that is just like such a pain to do that I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you really love those crystals and you can't get them anywhere else. That's why, you know, when you find nice crystals that are on sale or something, buy a bunch, because you might want them later on, and then it might be hard to find them. Because now I wanted to have another crystal that was a little bit smaller to fit beneath it. So I actually use kind of a teardrop one that I'm holding in place. And some of these crystals I foiled with just a quarter of the thickness of the normal 32/32 inch foil. And also some of them I used actually thinner than that, because some of these crystals are quite small and the edges are kind of angled, so they don't really have like a flat edge to put the foil on. So it's kind of tricky to do, and you don't want to have a really wide piece of foil, because if you use a wide piece of foil, you're going to end up with less crystal visible, obviously, when you're done. So as you can see, I'm using the glove itself to hold it. Now, if I didn't have the glove in my hand and then I tried to solder this on, it would be too hot. It would probably, you know, be on the verge of burning me. So having a little bit of space between me and the solder really helps. I've also sometimes used fabric or one of those soldering little thumb things you can get that are leather and stretchy fabric to put over your finger or thumb when you're soldering. So that works also. So sometimes I've used some fabric on the inside, or I've used even paper towels. But you're going to want to put, you have to have something there when you're trying to hold something in the air like this temporarily before you can tack it in. You know, you're going to tack it in place, and once it's soldered in place, then you're fine. You don't have to have your finger there. But at the time, you know, you have to hold it. So, you know, I added, made sure all the edges are, in fact, have solder on them. And then I was like, okay, is that enough? Um, I decided, nah, I want one more. So I had to find yet another even smaller. I think these are 10 millimeter diameter crystals I'm putting on right now, which are very small. And you, at least I don't. I mean, you can do what you want to, but I don't really like to foil anything under like 8 millimeter diameter. Usually 10 is the smallest that I use, but I know I do have some that are like maybe a rectangle that's 8 by 10. But it's getting kind of small, and it's really kind of tedious to do the foiling. And then of course when you solder the object on, you know, you got to be really, really careful not add too much heat, because if you add too much heat to it, the crystal will just pop out. Because, you know, the smaller it gets, the more important it is that you're not wrapping the foil so much that it takes up the whole top is no longer, you know, visible. So I like to just foil the edge so that I can see the whole crystal. Now, there are times when I'm done with a project and a crystal will just fall out, and I will, sometimes I will solder it back in, which, you know, can take some time because you got to refoil it. I've also just used super glue and glued it back in space. It really depends on what it looks like. But it's so easy for them to pop out that, you know, whatever works. I've even wrapped wire around things like this, so that gives it like an extra support. But even when you wrap wire around a crystal, you still have the problem of it, you know, maybe popping out from the heat, because you're still going to solder it on. So it's still that little danger of having it um, pop out. So you got to be pretty careful with it. So I just kind of keep turning it around and looking at it, making sure that everything has been soldered as well as possible. And they came out pretty symmetrical. You know, each piece, because I had that piece of paper that I had already drawn the perfect shapes on. And then, as you saw, I screwed screws or nails into each corner of the design before I wrapped the wire around the shape. I could really make sure that it was bent pretty evenly. And you can also buy, these are some of the crystals that I have that I'm going to choose from for my next project. These are beaded crystals. So these are not crystals that have been, that have always had the foil wrapped on it. But for this star, I didn't use beaded crystals. So that picture is just kind of an indication of wanting to have a good variety. These are actually crystals from a different drawer that I had a whole bunch of different crystals of different sizes, and I had bought stars and wired them together and then wrapped foil around the star itself so that I can solder to it. So that's the same thing you can do for the hexagons or octagon shapes. Instead of relying on yourself making the shape and soldering it together, you could um, buy it ahead of time. You know, you can buy shapes that people make different macrame or dream catchers from. That's, I think, what these are. And the good thing about doing that, as opposed to doing it yourself and bending your own wire, star, or polygon shape, is that it's usually a lot more accurate and a lot stiffer and stronger than if you did it yourself. But the drawback with that is, you know, you don't. It's hard to find the exact size you want. So, you know, you're kind of stuck on whatever size that you can buy. So if you get a piece of drafting paper or on the computer, draw the polygon you want, then you can get any size you want and just go for it that way, and you're not stuck to whatever you can find. Those those are little silicone washers that I put there to hold the next row of little glass crystals. So those little washers that I'm using are really handy because they will hold the crystal or whatever shape you want to do at the height that you want it, because you want to be able to solder to the most the largest diameter of the crystal. So you can use the washer as a way to raise the crystal up a little bit so it's even with the other ones that you're using. Now you might notice that these little 10 millimeters that I'm using right now are pointed on both sides. So the wash is great because the little pointy part is going to go inside the washer, and it's going to hold it exactly where I want it to go. Sometimes your crystals will be flat on one side and pointy on the other, and then you might want to hold them differently. So it really depends on the crystal at hand on how you're going to have to position them in order to solder. So as I said, this was actually a bought stars that I wired together, so they're pretty symmetrical. The only variety would be how I wired them together would make a little bit of a difference to how each section is, but they're very, very symmetrical, and I'm just adding solder to everything. So the star itself, which I wrapped in foil, is going to have solder on every edge, and I'm going to put solder um, obviously holding all my little crystals in place. And the washers, you can just get these washers anywhere. So they're washers people would use in like doing plumbing, or make sure they're silicone, because if they're silicone, then you can wash them really easily. They're heat resistant, so you're not going to end up soldering to them. So at one point I was trying to use regular washers, metal washers, which work great, except that they do they will let the solder right to them. So that's not what you want. So then that's when I saw that they made them in silicone, and so I was like, yay. So and they come in different sizes, and you can buy a whole bunch of them for not very much money, and it's just awesome to use them to balance your projects, and you can put one inside of another or put them on top of each other. And they also have the orangey ones that are larger and flat. The clear ones I found are kind of rounded on the edges, and the larger ones are flat, and um, they stack up really nicely. So that's really works good. So I'm just going to move some of my little washers apart, and then I'm going to add more solder to the rest of the star. So the topper of your trees. Now, you can make your topper to be flat like this, and I made a bunch of different toppers that are flat, or you can make them three-dimensional. It's really, you know, whatever you want. I've even made some of my trees have three-dimensional ones that the lights actually go inside of the toppers, so that so they shine on the inside. That's kind of fun. Um, These top of the flat ones, I have not added lights to the top of the flat ones, so they just kind of glow from the bottom tree itself, but they don't produce light on their own. So it's really whatever you come up with. You could, I guess, maybe with a hot glue gun or something, glue your lights actually to the star to make it stay together. But obviously you can't solder the lights on because you would kill the you'd melt the wires, and that wouldn't be good. So now I had to figure out how to decorate the middle of it, and I decided that I'm going to use some more of my teeny weeny 10 millimeter glass crystals for the edges and a little bit larger one in the middle. These 10 millimeter crystals, I really love them, but they are the worst things to foil because they're pointy on the top and pointy on the bottom, so they just have that very skinny ridge around them, and it's just really, really tedious to foil them. But they do look really nice in projects. So, it's kind of like, well, do I want to use them? Knowing that I'm going to probably have to do a bunch more, but they just are really pretty. I'll put them in my description page. They weren't very expensive. You got a whole bunch in an order, and they're just, I don't know if it's a bunch of 50 or something. It's a lot. You get a lot of them, and they're really, really pretty. And I got them from Amazon, so I will put them in the description page. And yes, I am an Amazon associate, and I will get a slight percentage I get a couple cents every time someone orders something. But I'm doing it really more so that you know where I get my projects, and I appreciate it if you click on my link. That's kind of nice, but you don't have to. I'm doing it more to tell you what I've gotten for my project. So I'm showing you now how I attach the star that I showed you earlier. This is the top of the tree itself, and I had already showed you the star sitting on top, and now I'm going to actually show you how I attached it. And tell you the truth, when I was done with my tree, the star was at like a little kilter, and so it was really easy to just heat it up at the top and then just straighten it out a little bit. So that's really cool. That's another thing that's nice about using solder in your project, is instead of making a project that is more permanent, like maybe with, I don't know, cement or glue or something. Solder, it can always be reheated and moved a little bit if needed. So yeah, that's as easy as it is to solder it on. Just hold it in place, add solder to wherever the star hit anything that was soldered. I just made sure that it had a lot of solder in that area, and it held together great. I kind of stuck the solder between a couple little pieces of glass at the top. Not very deeply in between the points, but enough so that it was like different edges I could attach to it. So it wasn't just like teeter-tottering right at the very, very top. So yeah, so that's the star at the top, and I really like the way that this star ended up looking, and this whole project was very nice. And then of course I had to add lights to it and clean it very well with soap and water and add lights to it, and And that's the tree when it's done. It was very pretty. And I had some twinkle lights when I was done so that it like twinkled and was very festive. So thank you for watching. I hope you got some inspiration to do some tree making of your own. And please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of the upcoming new trees videos, and have fun creating. Bye-bye.